call the meeting to order at 6. All board members are present with the exception of Jill Smith, who's excused. First up are public meeting minutes from July 23rd.
Motion to approve the public meeting minutes from July 23rd as presented.
Second.
Any other discussion? Those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Date, location, the next meeting is August 27th at Canterbury Elementary School. I will be away at a conference on August 27th, and I have confirmed with Jill that as long as it doesn't rain on the 26th, then she will be here the 27th. It's open. She has open house on the 26th outside, but if it rains, the rain date is the 27th. And she's required, So first up is public communication and correspondence. So I'll open it up for anyone who. Okay. Moving on is board member reports. Mark.
Nothing at this time.
Just like to say, we did the 10-mile road race on Saturday. We had a lot of student athletes come out. Did a really good job. They all finished. Some didn't like the aftermath of it, but they did good. It's good to see them out there.
Pass.
I don't have anything.
The only thing, we were invited, you being Randy, Alice, and I, were invited to the Canterbury Select Board meeting because they're trying to get out ahead of our tax rate impact from the last budget. And so,
Usually the select board meeting is the budget committee meeting.
The joint meeting between the board of selectmen and the budget.
okay.
Well, yeah, it's the first budget committee meeting.
Okay. Anyway, Debbie is also attending, and so is Michael. So to explain if they have questions about equalized valuations and the impact of returning money and that type of thing. So that's just an FYI.
Why is that?
September 9th. Okay. Business admin report. Debbie.
So the first thing I have for you is the P-card rebate. The P-card is the procurement card. It's the program we belong to, and we get money back based on how much we use card. We're the second highest in the state, I'm just pointing out. But we got a rebate of $12,293.06. Well, we can't compete with Concord. Yeah, Concord's the first. Anyway, we typically put this into the Tech Special Revenue Fund, so I'm bringing this to the board for the official approval of that.
Make a motion to authorize the card rebate funds to be placed into the Technology Special Revenue Fund.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Debbie.
So I've drafted the preliminary 25-26 budget development calendar. In looking at the different laws, it looks like there's some very strict and confusing dates. So I've sent the calendar to the attorney to have him review everything. Typically, it's the second Tuesday of January that petition warrant articles are due. The second Tuesday of January would also happen to be the last day to have the public hearing. So, yeah, So I've sent it off to Jim, and he'll be reviewing that. And once I hear back from him, I'll finalize that calendar and bring it back to you.
Okay.
Okay?
That's a mess up by the state. Like, you can't have.
The problem is the way the law is written. It's supposed to be 4 weeks before your deliberative session. The deliberative session is restricted by law, and it's just the way the calendar works out this year. So you won't have clear 4 weeks. It has to be at least 4 weeks before your deliberative session, and it won't be if it's the 14th, but then it's supposed to be the second Tuesday. So it's just the way the calendar falls this year. Because last year was January 9th, but that was the second Tuesday. So once we have that all done, I should have that back for the next meeting, I believe. The next thing on the agenda is student activity account changes. This is something I typically come to you with every year, so we can add the additional class at Belmont High School and then add a class at Belmont Middle School. Clubs and charters, once they're approved by the board, they're automatically added. So we're just looking to add the class of 2028 to Belmont High School and the class of 2032 to Belmont Middle School.
Motion to add the noted VHS and BMS classes to appropriate student activity.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
I
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Debbie?
Retained fund balance. So I do have changes to this. As I was completing the MS-25, I discovered that $147,000, which was a cash transfer between the food service program and the general fund, was incorrectly recorded as revenue. So, and then there was a couple of other, I always forget to reserve for prepaid out of fund balance. But the bottom line is the total fund balance that we have to either return and or retain totals $1,682,361. You can still retain up to the $923,418 or anything less than that. But I don't know what your hope is to return. If you wanted to return $1 million, since that seems to be one of the impacts between the loss of revenue last year, then that would allow us to hold on to $682,362.
So I have some questions about this. I saw this and I'm confused. So
Okay.
I pulled out my books from last year. A lot of people have been asking me about the tax increases because they're very upset. I watched the videos and we talked about how one of the reasons that we had returned so much money in the past was because of all these open positions. And we assured everyone that they were filled and that would not be happening again. And so like the budget was returning back.
Support staff have never been fully filled.
And I get that, but it was a lot of teaching. But I'm confused at how we're sitting here with what was originally a gross of $2.1 million again.
So some of it is excess revenues that we received. And a lot of it is, we had open positions, mostly support staff. And a lot of the ones that did change, they changed the health insurance that we might have budgeted it to per person or a family. They only took a single, some didn't take any, they took a buyback. So there were savings in benefits, and there was some additional savings in what we had anticipated for special ed costs in some areas. Some were over, but some were under. And I am doing the complete analysis, and that will be available for the next. But the majority of it was salaries and benefits.
Right ahead.
Don't you usually send us the balance? I forget what it's called, but basically the shows the overages and underages of all the funds.
Yes,
I think we should see that relatively soon.
yes. Yeah, and I just had to get the DOE 25 done because they changed that, so it was a lot more.
That would give a better picture as
Yes.
to where
Yeah.
under and over those categories.
This shocked me as well, because
I brought my budget books. I'm like, what are we doing wrong here? Like, why do we keep having all this money? Like, I didn't really know what to say on this. And then part of me is like, we shouldn't be keeping anything.
Well,
Like,
part of it is the retained fund balance that you held on to becomes part of the fund balance So that's part of the $2 million.
So that's the 800,000 we retained from last year.
Correct, so that
So-
rolls into the new fund balance.
Okay.
So that's saying we really had 800,000 left at the end of this year?
Now, if we retained $800,000 this year in fund balance and didn't need to use it,
Right.
you automatically have a fund balance of $800,000.
Right, but I'm saying we didn't spend in our budget $882,000. So if you take 1.6 million and you minus 800,000,
Now, some of it was excess revenues.
But you're talking about the fund balance from last year.
no, I'm talking about if we have $1.6 million.
So it's higher than that because you've already deducted the amount that we need to transfer for voting. So it was a gross of over 2 million.
Right.
Right, okay. So you're saying we had excess revenue?
Give some examples of that.
Yeah.
So one of the examples of excess revenue is we may have budgeted $50,000 for Medicaid reimbursement, but we got $126,000. Because they made some law changes and they're really staying on top of getting that submitted.
For
So we've been
budgeting
getting,
purposes for next year, we need to know the difference between how much of this was excess revenues
Correct.
versus
Right,
items.
and that's the analysis that I generally do provide to you. I just haven't got that done yet.
and when's the MS, whatever the.
September 1st, it has to be to the state.
I also think we have to, at least in my mind, think about, like, it feels like when I saw this, like, we should know about this earlier, right? Like, how would we know we have, I mean, I'm not saying we would spend it, it just, this comes out of the blue. Because it seemed like we were more on track. I don't know, I thought we were, because
My analysis when I presented what we were gonna be underspent in the budget, I had projected $700,000 or $800,000 under expenditures.
right, that I remember,
Right.
but then to be at 2 million.
So what I should have done was, if we're $800,000 under expended in the budget, add the $800,000 and then
Yes,
look at excess revenues. And that's part of the analysis that I
yeah,
probably have to
that's-
incorporate in the future.
because I expected to see like $800,000. Not that I think that is nothing, I'm just saying I didn't expect.
So I know we discussed this last year, but I'd like to refresh everyone's memory on how often we dip into these funds and what is the requirement to use them.
So the requirement is anything the board comes up against in an emergency that they did not budget for, they have to hold a public hearing. And then at the end of the year, when we do the annual report, we have to provide that information to the voters in the annual report. This is what we retained, this is what we used. This past year was the first year we used retained fund balance, and that was to purchase the kitchen equipment for both middle school and middle elementary school.
But in hindsight, we didn't necessarily have to use retained balance.
In hindsight, we didn't have to. We were hoping at the time that we were going to fill all of those positions. And if we had filled all of the positions, we would not have had money left over in the budget, and we cannot spend excess revenue.
Okay, I mean, that's good to make sure we're clear about, is that excess revenues, whether it's, 500,000.
Right.
I can't spend.
Right.
So last year we didn't retain this, or we didn't retain the recommended amount. It was like 100 and something thousand left. And we had talked as a board about eventually getting to the place where we only retained up to $500,000. Because it is emergency use only. It's not something that we tap into often, and we're just sitting on people's money. So I don't feel comfortable holding on to $923,000. Especially since the town of Canterbury has already received their your coupons. It's a $1.4 million increase for the school, what they're having to pay.
Well, that's the initial letter of
Yeah.
the assessments, yeah.
And that's why we've all been summoned
Right.
to the joint, because they don't know how to explain this.
Correct.
And
But
when
I also want to remind you, whatever you return this year as fund balance looks like it's lost the following year.
Correct.
So say that again, so if we return, I'm gonna make this up, if we return $1 million this year, then it looks like it's lost revenue next year.
So you're back in the same boat.
So we have to
Going to
raise that
budget
money.
committee, we explained
But-
why you're $1.4 million over.
So maybe I don't understand this. So if we start the school year and we had this $800,000 cushion in there, so we count that as revenue every year?
So when I have to complete the fund balance, I get the bottom line fund balance, you decide what you're gonna retain. The rest of it goes back as revenue to offset when they set the tax rates.
Okay.
So that would be like, if I knew that, if the state calculation for adequate education increased $1 million this year, and they said this is a one-time payment. So we're dropping the tax rate because I have an additional $1 million this year. When I do budget development next year, I'm not gonna have that $1 million as revenue. In order to balance the budget and the revenues, the towns are gonna have to make up that $1 million. So when we return $1 million this year, that's a loss of revenue the following year. So you're just gonna have to make up the $1 million the following year.
So the,
And when we do the budget, we don't project that we're gonna return anything because we don't know at that time what we're gonna have to return.
so we didn't project anything
Correct.
this time.
Correct.
Sometimes we have, but this time.
Typically, we've only done that if there's like a collective bargaining agreement,
Right.
and then I got a phone call from DRA.
I'm curious, after hearing Randy's comments, of who is comfortable with retaining $923,000 for 18? Because I would prefer to have a lower amount. Understanding what we're up against come budget development time. I just think that there's a part of me that says it's just bad budgeting to have that much
Right.
money left over. And if it's gonna be tougher during budget development and when we try to self-budget, it's gonna be tougher, but at least we can say, we honestly feel like we're budgeting a more reasonable. I don't know if I put it that way. So if you're thinking to retain less, I would agree with that person.
I think that the goal that was set last year was still a good goal.
I know the objective was to lower it incrementally. I can't remember the reasoning behind that though. Can you remember?
I think part of it was so you wouldn't have these huge swings.
What did we return last year?
Well, according to the meeting minutes, we returned 1.2. According to the book, it was 1.3. So we had voted to, or actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. We returned 1.3 because we lowered the amount to 800,000. The year before, we returned 590,000. We had expected to return $1 million, but there were some items that had come in that we were obligated to do.
So last year, if we returned 1.3 million, did the budget, it was showing a loss.
In revenue,
Of
yes,
revenue.
because we didn't have fund balance to carry forward.
Right, so we
Right.
used we budgeted for a loss of 1.3 million. I don't want to retain 923,000.
Trying to look at the minutes, I don't see anything about our discussion of the tier.
It wasn't in there, but that's why we went down to 800. We talked about eventually getting to that.
The explanation was that if we return, if we say we, first for round numbers, if we set that $500,000 mark and went to it last year, there'd be a huge give back to then turn around and be immediately appropriated again. So it was going to be a yo-yo. So we had multiple discussions about chipping away at it and bringing it down slowly, so we wouldn't have the big swing, the big yo-yo.
So just to keep the conversation going, we did 800,000 last year, 700 this year.
Yeah.
That leaves us enough for a rainy day fund in case of a big emergency, and it allows us to incrementally chip at it over time.
So we're turning just under $1 million, right? Because if we're at 1.682.61,
Yep. So we're returning $982,361.
I'm comfortable with that.
Agree?
Motion to retain $700,000 of fund balance.
Second.
additional discussion?
I guess this question always comes up, somebody that's listening, like, so when am I gonna see this in my house? Don't. See, like, can you explain again how the money gets?
Yeah, so what happens when we say we return money? We don't mail checks out to taxpayers. What we do when I do the revised revenues, which are also due on September 1st, I will let the state know this is what we anticipate. We look at what we budgeted, and then we may have some changes to that. It could be if we've had additional students that qualify for special ed assistance, we might get more money. And so I look at all of that, do adjustments to the revenue, and part of that is going to be we're returning $982,361. So that gets added into all of the money that we anticipate to collect. So that means what's left over that gets divided between Canterbury and Belmont is less than what it would be if we didn't return the money. So then when they set the tax rate, they're collecting from each community their portion of the 982 less.
So it should help.
Correct.
I mean,
Just it offsets
It's
a
offset.
portion
Right.
of the tax rate.
right.
So it's like we've already collected the money, we don't need to collect it again.
Any other questions or discussion?
So I will finalize the DOE 25.
I have to vote, I didn't call it.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, you can still finalize the 25.
Once you've voted and made a final decision, I will be finalizing the DOE 25 and sending it out tomorrow via PandaDoc for your signatures. For the DOE 25 cover sheet, the MS 25 cover sheet, And I will send the DOE itself as a separate email. It's got the multiple tabs, so you can see the cost for the schools.
That just clarifies the numbers. So do we still have the purchase orders, 190,000 in purchase orders?
Yeah, that didn't change.
Okay, so that's right.
Yeah.
And then the balance of, they had 168231661.
168236193 was the,
361.
yeah, but they rounded all off there, 360.
Right, and we are authorized to retain up to,
The 900, whatever, but the board's only retaining 700,000.
982,360.
Yeah, that's the amount we're authorized.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Career and Tech Ed Transportation Aid Grant, would this be revenue?
Not all of it.
Okay. Go ahead.
So in June, I found out that there was a Career and Tech Ed Transportation Grant availability. So I submitted the grant, and the grant was, they looked at what we spent last year for voc ed transportation and what we have budgeted for this year. And they wanted to know what the state supplied for funding for that transportation, which is not very much. So I completed the application and I sent it in. And between the 2 years, the total that what we spent last year and budgeted this year is $138,949.20. So we got approved for the grant. The portion that we paid last year will be coming in as other income this year, which we cannot spend. The balance will be used to offset what we budgeted for voc ed. So you're going to be under expending the budget by that amount. I believe it was like $93,000 or something like that. It's significant. It's whatever the voc ed that we pay the transportation company for Laconia, that will be underspent in the budget. So you know you're going to have at least that much underspent. But it was not anticipated. It was a grant that just came out of the blue, so you cannot just accept it without a public hearing.
So potentially that number will be added into the fund balance at the end of the
Correct.
24-25 school year.
In its entirety, the whole 138 will be part of the fund balance.
Oh, because it's coming in as other income.
Some's other income, some's under expenditure.
I see.
Unless you have a major blowout in the budget and you need to spend that portion.
Yeah.
Motion to schedule a public hearing on August 27th, 2024, relative to the acceptance of the Career and Technical Education Transportation Incentive Grant.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Okay, next up are handbooks.
So we did go back and make the changes, work with the principals to make those changes in the handbooks based on the feedback for the first reading. So looking for approval this evening.
Want to start with Belmont Elementary?
Yeah, so I'm just a total clarity, let me ask. The changes that were requested, they're now showing up in yellow? Or are they, like, there was some schools where there was like,
Yeah, one person did it in green, but this, so the yellow was changed as last time, and I think green was changed this time.
shade.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure I was clear.
Do you need a motion?
Sure.
Yes. Motion to approve the Belmont Elementary School 2024-2025 student handbook as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. CES.
A motion to accept CES student handbook for correction.
Second.
Well, as presented.
Or as
because it's-
presented, whatever.
Okay, just want to clarify.
You know what I'm saying.
There's no additional changes on it.
I don't know who seconded it, but it was apparently Randy did.
I thought it was issue.
Any discussion on the CES handbook? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. EMS.
I couldn't remember from the last meeting about whether all assignments, whether the goal was to have it be a 4, and whether or not Alma can differentiate between an assignment that only goes to a 3 with factoring in versus one that goes to a 4 based on where it says a 3 will not be factored in when calculating the overall standard score or content area grade.
What page is it?
13. 13 in the handbook.
To answer that question, Mark, the teacher can select as to whether that assessment goes to the overall grade or not. So.
Okay, so it's a manual decision. Then.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I
If you
couldn't.
can't obtain a 4, the teacher clicks off that it doesn't affect the overall grade. So only those assignments that score 4, because the averaging is standard in the overall course grade.
And they're color coded in Alma, right?
They will be.
So this is from Jill on page 15 and 16 in the handbook. In the reassessment procedures for 5th and 6th, in step 1, it states 10 school days to complete the reassessment process, which matches the high school. But in step 2, it says reassessment should be done within 2 weeks. It seems like it should be the same.
So instead of saying 2 weeks, 10 days, 10 school days,
Yeah, 10 school days is 2 weeks,
Yeah.
so,
so it's the same.
yeah, we should just want consistency in that.
The consistency of language. She also has in the same section, still in the reassessment procedures for 5-6, it states a student must have a 3 for their habits of work to have input about the reassessment. Does that not apply to 7th and 8th or high school? It just seems like 5 and 6 have more guidelines than the other grades. I think it should be more guided at this level since it's new to these students. Or perhaps she's not interpreting it correctly, but that's what jumped out to me. So I don't know how others read that.
And this wasn't a change, this was in there already.
You know, on the same topic, you know, we have a 10-day limit, or maybe, I don't know if this is middle school or high school, 10-day limit, but then later on in that, it talks about either administrative or teacher discretion on whether or not it goes longer. Maybe that's not high school. I forgot to draw a line between the two.
It probably is in ours, honestly, it's
it would have to take a special circumstance for it to go longer than that in any of our cases. But, I mean, the policy states, there's guidelines within the high school policy, but, you know, if a kid is ill for part of it, if there was, you know, some sort of underlying circumstance, we just wanted to have something in there that, you know, you need to communicate if there is a need for that time to be extended, or to request it to be extended.
And that's on page 16 in the middle school handbook.
Yeah, I just
The
wrote
student
that.
needs, yeah.
Okay, so
So I agree, but I think there should, the level of, I guess, accountability should increase going from 5.6 to 7.8, not decrease.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, go 5, 6, and it's like 7 apart.
Right.
So and then you look at 7, 8, it's just, so it's not clear whether, does that stuff above apply as well, or?
So to me, when I read this, it kind of makes me think that they're trying to instill certain habits and expectations on the 5th and 6th graders. So like, you know, you have to have a 3 if you want to be able to reassess. Your parents may have to sign. I think maybe the intent, that's what I get from when I read this, is to kind of create those good foundational habits. That's how I took it when I read it.
And there's more ownership in the 7th and 8th grade on the student side.
I agree. However, how do you defend the 7-8 versus the 5-6 when a parent wants a reevaluation below a 3, or a student wants a reassessment below a 3?
I guess I get what you're saying, just simple question. Does a student in 7th and 8th grade have to have some work score 3.0 or better, or do they have to input about how the assessment happens? That's not clear.
Specific questions, I mean, Tim's back there at the statements. Any specific?
I'll bring it back.
Yeah. Not sure, specific question.
I think the question is, for 7th and 8th grade, do they need the habits of work score?
Does number 7 apply to 7th and 8th grade?
I mean, I guess it's more about, number 7 isn't about whether they can reassess. It's about whether they have input into when and how the assessment happens, not about
I just,
the ability. Yeah, no, I agree, I'm just,
I think it should be spelled out clearly so that we can refer back to.
If we ought to make a change tonight, can we approve the handbook with the changes that we make tonight?
Yeah, you need to approve it tonight. So if you,
Right,
if
so-
you make changes to the board tonight, yes, you need to approve it tonight because it's a little late in the game.
Yeah.
so do we want number 7 to apply to 7th and 8th grade? Is that the question on the table for this piece?
I think so. It seems appropriate to carry that through.
Yeah, I guess my problem is it's bigger than number 7. I think it's more, you know, I have a student that's in 6th grade, they're moving to 7th grade. What changes for them? It's not clear what changes for them in these 2 sections.
So they have to start advocating for themselves. They have to fill out a form to like do the reassessment for the
Yeah.
different things.
And it sounds like no matter what grade, you can try to reassess.
You're saying because of books 5 and 6 has 7 bullet points and 7 just has.
Yeah, it's more spelled out, so it's clear. Where 7th and 8th grade basically fill out this form, which is fine. And students can advocate for themselves, parents can help the student advocate for themselves, whatever. But we don't know what the rules are.
All right, so 7 says, let's just talk about the 7. If the student has a 3 in their habits of work, they can have input about when and how the reassessment happens. If they do not, the teacher has full discretion on when and how the reassessment occurs.
Fifth and 6th grade.
For 5th and 6th graders.
I misunderstood that.
I was just reading what it says. So it says if the student has a 3 in their 3 or better, they have input about when and how
Right.
the reassessment happens, not if it happens.
Right.
And then if a student scores below a 3, the teacher has full discretion on when and how the reassessment occurs.
Maybe we just make 7th and 8th go 1, opportunities will be made available, blah, blah, blah. 2, reassessment process must be initiated by the student. So it's not about the teacher-led process. 3, the format of the assessment is blank. So then it looks, to me it's spelled out, it's just in paragraph form, whereas above it's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's,
So I don't know this.
well, that's my suggestion. I'm not,
Sounds like a good idea. It gives you clarification. These are the steps. There you go. The rest is on you.
I know that helps.
Yeah, I personally, I like the fact that the 6th is spelled out. You know, oh, they gave me an alternative version of the assessment. Well, they can, since teachers may give alternate.
Well, this says the format of the reassessment is at the discretion of the teacher. That would be bullet, in this case, paragraph 3. So it's not about, I mean, we could do it the other way, teachers.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. I would add, if nothing else, 1, 2, 3. If we want to add other pieces, we could. but-
I'm making the assumption that in 7th and 8th grade, the reassessment score replaces previous grade learning, also score. But I'm making an assumption here, so I'm reading stuff.
Okay, so that should be added. I agree.
I think if any of those numbers apply to both grade levels, it should be highlighted above them both or included in both on one here.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
So what we'll do is we'll add any of the paragraphs in 5, 6 that apply to 7th and 8th under 7th and 8th.
Yeah, I'm fine with
Yep.
these, I just wanted to be clear, so perfect example is a student going from 6th to 7th grade.
Yeah, I
What
agree.
changed for them, what didn't change?
And it was similar numbering.
Yeah, the 1, 2, 3.
All right, so are we ready to do this? Any
Anything
other?
else for EMS? I don't know.
Motion to approve the Belmont Middle School 2024-2025 handbook with noted changes.
Second.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. ES. Yep,
So,
questions?
right off the bat, I just want to make sure I understand, because I did not go back and look at last meeting's 100 pages or whatever, but principals welcome, there's green sections, those were not in
your first reading. Some of them actually we discussed that night, but because we just had that meeting with Alma, the virtual meeting with them, so like the weighting of the formative that gets to a 4 versus a summative, that hadn't even been decided because we didn't know how Alma was able to do it. So things like that were included in there, plus, feedback that we had gotten from the board, tried to respond to that. So anything in green, this is in response to some of those things, again, many of which, Randy, I know you asked about the consequences associated with the tardies and stuff like that. So Vanessa and I had conversations, and so you see that some of that's still in yellow because we've already recommended some changes, but since then, the green is in response to that consideration. Maybe I made it more confusing. I tried to make it easier.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Questions?
As a group, are we still good with the credit earned to 2.0? Personally, I'm not, but I don't know if anybody thought about that additionally over the last couple of weeks.
I'm okay with it. Because of the reasons I said before, what it equates to.
Yep.
As am I. So in case anyone does not remember, when you look at the crosswalk, the 2.0 matches to a D minus, which in traditional grades is still.
Thank you.
I mean, does it mess with the GPA calculate?
And also the definition of a 2 says that the student independently demonstrates foundational content knowledge and understanding. So to me, that should earn them credit.
Yeah, I guess I agree. Personally, I use a crosswalk because I'm comfortable more with the letter grades, and I think the 2 is passing. It's low, but it's passing.
Motion to approve the Belmont High School 2024-2025 handbook as presented.
Second. Sorry, I'm so used to.
Just
jumps in there.
Continuing discussion. All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstention? Motion carries. Okay. Athletic handbooks. Okay, starting with VMS. Actually, it should say student.
Athletic and co-curricular.
You know, we had a fairly lengthy discussion about students reporting out whether it's for grade checks for co-curricular or athletics, and really not much of a reference in either the middle school or the high school. I know we had talked about, within the season, possibility of a 2-week cycle. The students bring their sheet to the teachers, and when we talked about it for the student handbook, we were told, or we agreed that it should be in the athletic handbook. And again, I'm not seeing that, and it seemed to be important to a few of us anyway. I mean, they have the grade reporting once in September and then the next one in December.
So it says students have been declared ineligible may not participate in interscholastic travel competition and may not sit on the bench during competition for a period of 5 school days from the date they were declared ineligible. Participation may resume after 5 days if the classroom teacher is satisfied with the evidence to meet the proficiency.
Right, well, that's once they've been, so if they hit the September 27th, or either September 27th or December 4th, if they've been deemed ineligible, then they're sitting. But there seems to be awfully long spans in between the grade report checks, so that you can make it through both of the season without having a grade check done.
So maybe I'm just reading this wrong, I'm not a sports person, but it looks like, let's say, September 27th, they're deemed ineligible. They're out for 5 days. During that time, they have to bring it up, and then they can go back, if I'm reading this correct.
Yep. Yeah, so when it was originally presented last time, it had been trimmed down to those 3 checks only each trimester. So what we added into pilot for this next year is in between those 2 checks is like the coach's review, which will be a sheet that the kids get all their teachers to sign and hand to their coaches on those coach review dates that are on there. So it's very similar to what it was last year. As opposed to when it first came, it was to only the 3 administrative ones that the middle school was doing. So that's the change from.
Yeah, so it was on page 28 of the.
So it went from 3 checks to 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I saw it.
That coach's review is what the board discussed last time, so that students are working with their coaches on that review.
Right.
So
Right,
that's
that's what we
what
wanted.
And co-curricular. I'm comfortable with the addition of this because I think it adds a piece to it. So. I don't know that we want, I just think it's a lot to add more. What did we do last year? Were there 6?
5, because we didn't have the end of the year one last year that affected the following year, so that's why it's 6 technically this year. So basically, the only date that wouldn't have been there would have been the 6th.
I apologize because I should know this, but I'm a little unclear. What is a coach's review? Like, are they given a list of grades?
No, so basically, each kid, we're working on a form and finalizing that. That will be given to the kids to go around to their teachers, and they need to bring that sheet back to their coaches. And if the coach gets that sheet back from the student with all the signed pieces, then that basically said that this kid's good in my class. And if they don't get it signed and it's not returned, they fall into that 5-day period, just like it was. The only difference is now not putting that weight on the administrative side of it and having the kids do the due diligence to get around to their teachers to get that signed, and then the coaches kind of keep it on top of that.
And you'll work with the coaches and the principals will work with whoever for co-curriculars to, to make sure everybody knows.
Yeah, because it's obviously a change, so
Right.
there's going to be a little bit of growing pains with figuring it all out. But
Because consistency
good.
is important.
Motion to approve the Belmont Middle School Student Athletic Co-Curricular Handbook for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second.
Discussion, additional. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. MS. That would be HS.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
I have the same question, but in the high school, there's There's no dates that I noticed. He gives the consequences, but no means to.
Yeah, I think this date should be spelled out.
I would put the date, because you have the
We
dates
have- it's
in
in-
VHS handbook.
It's in, I know it's in the thing, but anyways.
It's in the student handbook, but I agree it should be in the
Yeah.
athletic.
Even if it's copied, if it's in the student handbook.
But it-
copy and paste.
yeah.
One, for consistency with the middle school, but two, just doesn't.
It should be streetwise. I agree.
I make a motion to approve the Belmont High School Student Athletic Co-Curricular Handbook for the 2024-2025 school year with noted changes.
Second.
Additional discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, on the horizon.
There is no such thing as finance committee.
I wondered that too.
We were doing that.
So, this is getting out there a little ways, but after the first grading period, say for the middle or high school, whatever, I guess I would like to have another look at where the students are in relation to their grades, in hopes that, in theory, the number of students that are failing or confused or don't understand is lower than it was in that period last year. So, I think, I don't know when that is on here, but I think we should have it. And I realize we won't have that information the day the semester ends or whatever, but soon.
I like though too where you're going, because when is the first progress?
Yeah, progress report. Yeah.
The reaction to, like how we get regular updates on what we're trying to address.
So for example, last year it was probably later in the year, but we found out, this percentage of students are, under a 2 or they're failing, math scores are down. I want to see information as soon as it's available.
I'll say it's probably going to be easier for us to pull that on a more consistent basis. I mean, I got to find out what kind of reports we can get from Alma, and building those can cost some extra money if you're looking for specific things or whatever. But because the scores are now going to be rolling rather than teachers doing an updated standard score at each of those marks, then we can look at how a kid is doing in real time. The important things to keep in mind, like Michelle, you asked when the first one was, and it's October 4th is the first check. It's just wherever the kid stands academically at that point now, versus, okay, everybody, all the teachers, make sure that you now are updating your standard scores, looking at that full body of evidence, make your claim and all that. It's, here's where the kid stands. So that actually takes some of that work off of the teacher, because it's kind of, it is what it is at the moment. We don't have to wait for the teachers to do that. We can see kids' grades in real time. I think that's one of the hopefully one of the benefits of moving to Alma.
Yeah, I want to see information, data.
Yeah.
Good or bad, I just want to.
Yeah, and one of the tough things in the past has been working interventions in prior to those checks, because again, the kid didn't have necessarily standard scores and everything until that time. They had grades, they had scores that were in there, but not every teacher was creating standard scores as it rolled, whereas now it's going to be creating those standard scores every time they put something in that, you click that little box that impacts the standard score.
So we could include that data in the principal reports on the November 12th meeting if October was the first check.
Sounds good. So Sean, I know you had asked for information on enrollment and class sizes and what's being offered.
Yeah.
We should probably get that. I mean, in that same October 12th, we should be able to have decent, classroom enrollment numbers and that type of thing, moving forward for budget.
Separate topics.
Yeah, October 1st is really the formal date when our enrollment numbers are solidified. That's when we report to the state, so somewhere we can get that.
By then, the students aren't moving, they are where they are.
Not typically. So you could do that on the 8th or the 22nd. October.
Any other? I think there was a note that we were supposed to, is this where we talk about where we want to do with town officials? That was in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, on September 10th, we would meet with Belmont town officials.
That's not our little meeting. Or October.
What's that?
I had a note that we could look at that, I don't know what it meant. Because there was discussion of should we hold it together, should we not hold them together?
Oh, right.
We can still address that at a different time, but if we're gonna meet the Belmont town officials on September 10th, does it make sense to meet with the town officials at that point in time? Look at the budget, like, I don't know, I'm just putting it out there because we need to figure out.
When do we get our budget books?
In October.
October?
So that was the
Push it
issue,
back
we're
on.
moving them too early.
Yeah.
Right,
So we need to
So
bump those
I
up.
think it was to make it more in line with budget season,
right.
which means we can keep it out.
I'll move to the 22nd, then I have a chance to look at our books and see what we're up against, and we can tell them.
October 22nd?
Yeah. Do both officials, both Canterbury and Belmont together, that way.
So joint meeting.
Yeah. They want to do that.
What would still be outstanding on the 22nd?
Revenues from the state, any separation, severance, health insurance rates,
When do we get revenue from the state?
November 1st.
And that's the same as health insurance rates?
November 15th, I believe, is the health insurance.
And then,
You could follow up with the meeting.
yeah, no, I for my own, like,
So when would we get the books? The 8th?
No, you're gonna get in October,
Yeah.
but we won't, you should have the books.
I guess my preference would be not to get the books the same night we meet with the.
right.
Well, literally just.
I want to look at it, that's what I mean, I want to look at it before the talk.
Yeah.
So October 22nd might be too early.
Or the 8th, November 12th is.
What if we meet with them for one of our budget workshops?
Sure.
Yeah,
We have those, but we don't have the
those
calendar,
aren't,
right?
they aren't the calendar yet.
We don't have the calendar yet, but I know I scheduled, the draft calendar.
I don't want another meeting, but part of me feels like we should have
Yeah,
an additional budget workshop meeting soon after we get the books and have a chance to
Yeah.
digest it with the town officials.
So
what
I think, I don't know how early Belmont starts working on their budget, but I know that this meeting on September 9th is the start of Canterbury's budget season. So they are talking about their budget, so.
Belmont's already in this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're already talking about it, they're already in it.
Yeah.
And having that, they're going to be very far along in their process. So I think if I remember correctly, last year, the ask from the select board members from both towns was to have it earlier because that's when their discussions are. I know that our budget committees don't line up perfectly, but I think that that's why we pushed these earlier.
Yeah, but at the same time, they ask us questions we don't know, because we
Right.
don't have our budget book, we
I
don't know
know.
what the answers are.
I know,
So-
it's
I thought we,
well, should we?
Well, why don't we put it out to them, say we can meet with you here, here's what we know, here's what we won't know, or we can meet with you here, here's what we think we might know.
If you could ask that question, it'd be great. I'm like,
I thought,
because I mean, what was it last year with Belmont? Like, they're asking us questions, we're like, here. We haven't seen that book.
both towns ended up doing that. We don't really answer.
so it doesn't, to me, make sense. They want to know like the driver of the budget and the.
And for them, it doesn't make sense to have it that much later, so I feel like maybe 2 meetings might end up being well, I
On
don't
the
know.
flip side, I'd be happy to, but if we don't have the information they need,
Right.
I don't know why it
Right.
would be helpful to them. I'm
They're
happy to
pretty
meet with them, but
I'd say look at October 22nd, the joint meeting for
Should I send my list of questions ahead of time?
it's a little earlier.
So
We'll
just,
send those out.
just so you know, what the budget development calendar has is October 8th would be your first look at the budget. And then the following week, October 15th, you would meet with the administration to review their budgets. And then the next October 22nd is a board meeting and budget work session.
So 22nd actually makes more sense.
Yeah.
So, last year, if you can look at this, last year, the budget wasn't ready the first time we thought we were gonna first look at it.
Right.
So and actually it's happened 2 years, which I'm fine with, because I think we want a budget I don't want a budget just to have a budget, I want a budget that, that due diligence. So I just want to make sure if October 8th is actually realistic for us to get budget books. Because I'd rather
The
know.
22nd would be a towns. If we have to get the books on the 15th, then we would be administrators. That's a worst case scenario, but it's.
Well, we can't get the books on the 15th when we have administrators, because we wouldn't have time to review.
I've always put on the horizon tentative meeting, which will happen for the selectmen for the 22nd of October.
I'm sure we can sign it.
Okay. Anything else for on horizon?
I said we have to change the time of the building grounds. It says 5, it's supposed to be 5:30.
Thanks, Jeff.
That's Randy has a hard time getting that time, so we changed it to 5.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Okay. Volunteer list.
Make a motion to accept the volunteer list as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Alice.
Okay, so next up, we have a first reading on one policy and a proposal to remove another. This is our class size policy. We, at our last policy meeting, we looked through a number of different class size policies from other districts that Michael had pulled together for us. And there were a few of them that we liked what they said and all of that. So the first paragraph there is actually the New Hampshire School Boards Association's recommendations. And then recognizing that our district is, you know, a little different. We have other aspects that we pulled in from Guilford and Merrimack Valley school districts.
And this is first reading, so it's not for action, right?
Is this policy required? I just wouldn't recommend it.
It's not required because the minimum standards
Outline.
outline the,
Did you notice whether other school districts have a system or not?
well, the ones we looked at, what were there, like 5 or 6 of them?
Really consistent school district.
Some just had the New Hampshire School Boards Association language, some had, you know, additional verbiage.
Particularly because for the Merrimack Valley, they have a number of small town schools.
Yeah.
Webster.
So I like this. But now I want to know, like, should we enforce it? Like, what happens if we get over? You know, some schools have some bigger classes. I'm thinking elementaries.
It says that we'll strive to achieve. And that gives you a way out.
Yeah, there's no wording in here that sets a minimum and maximum, because they have to have flexibility depending on what the morning numbers are. So that's why it says the goal is to maintain, you strive to, compared to
You will.
setting a cap or a minimum.
And I know in the past, like with big classes, we try and break them up into smaller, so I know we're good about that.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I like that you guys gave credit to the other school districts that we probably exceeded.
I don't.
I was wondering if that's what.
You don't?
I think it's important to have that on there.
What if someone took our
What if it says policy inspired?
policy inspired?
I like the strike line 48.
All right, well, if there's no more questions or comments on that one, we can move to JLA, which is the student insurance program. Ultimately, we're looking to remove this one because we don't currently have any families we've never had any families that have utilized this insurance policy.
We had one family 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay. So one family in the entirety of the time that we've had this. Additionally, the cost is increasing for this insurance program, and Healthy Kids actually offers insurance for families that qualify too. So it's not as though there won't be some sort of insurance that is being offered. It's just not going to be through the district.
Because there's Medicaid and expanded children's Medicaid.
Is this one of the pieces of paper that comes home every year with all students?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Because we're in the trash.
And because this does come to us, we're still getting it through Healthy Kids. There's no liability to remove this. It's just.
So if you say, I mean, so there's a family that obviously makes more than enough money to not qualify for Healthy Kids. For whatever reason, they opt not to carry health insurance for themselves or their, or their kids. How does that play out? So you have that kid has no medical coverage, goes on a field trip to when they hike Cannon Mountain, slips, falls, breaks a leg or an arm. How does that play out? I know ADA is gonna, well, I guess I don't know, how does the, well, not the facilities, but the, or ACA, there we go. Does that automatically step in and cover?
Well, if they wouldn't qualify for Healthy Kids anyway, this was only that the district was paying if they qualified. And
Then it wouldn't matter.
right,
Okay.
It's the family responsibility to provide insurance.
Right.
The district will only be liable in that scenario that you reference, Mark, as if somebody was negligent in some way whatsoever.
Right, yeah, no, I mean, I thought about this, and I kept coming back to what's the, you know, what's the liability for the school, and, you know, apparently it's not, so.
Oh, this one's actually up for action.
Motion to remove policy JLA.
Second.
Additional discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Next up are nominations, which we can do in public if we have nothing of a personnel nature. So we have Appendix B, and then BMS science teacher, and district social worker. So we'll start with Appendix B nominations. Is there anything we can vote here, or should we go into non-public?
Make a motion to accept the appendix B nominations.
Second.
So I'll just, before you vote, just say I'm going to abstain from the vote, as I commonly do. I don't want there to be any conflict of interest issue that people are going to post on Facebook about what I do with family or whatever. I would also be willing to recuse myself and leave the room if that would be easier for the board, but I'm happy to do that as well. But as is a typical process, I've had for 15 years, I'll abstain from anyone else.
Does anyone, Sean, do you know?
I do not. Nor do I.
Okay, may I have a second? Do I have second? You, somebody.
Jeff or Randy?
Okay.
That's what I had.
Any other? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? One abstention. Next up, EMS science teacher. Public.
Make a motion to nominate the BMS science teacher. Oh, can we do both?
Sure.
Yes. I just
Sure.
want-
To nominate a social worker.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Public communication, correspondence.
No.
We do have, notes in non-public that can be approved in public if there's nothing.
Motion to approve the July 23rd non-public meeting as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay. Before our motion to adjournment, I did send all of you today, thanks to Jeff, actually it was thanks to Kim, Haley or Hallie? Haley. A fillable form for
Nice.
the superintendent evaluation.
I
So
was trying
again,
to play with it, and it was hard.
thanks to Jeff. So I just want to make sure so you know I sent that all to you. So both the comment section and the, so. Thank you. Thank you.
Take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?